Welcome back to Talk Plus Water, the podcast for Texas Plus Water, a publication of the Texas Water Journal, the Meadows Center for Water and the Environment at Texas State University, and the Texas Water Resources Institute at Texas A&M University in College Station. This is our fourth podcast, and the date today is January 15th. And I am interviewing today Michael Campana, who is a professor at Oregon State University in Corvallis, Oregon. And Oregon State University, for those who do not know, has a world-renowned water resources program. And Michael is not only a professor at Oregon State, but he is also active in a leadership role at the American Water Resources Association. And so, welcome, Michael. Glad to have you on.
Well, Todd, thanks very much. I'm glad to be here.
So, why don't you start out with telling us a little bit about your background and career?
Okay, be glad to. Well, my background is in earth sciences, as you might guess. I've got an undergraduate degree in geology from the College of William and Mary, and that was way back in 1970, if you can believe that. I have a hard time believing that. And then after that, I went to the University of Arizona in Tucson, which at the time was developing inter and multidisciplinary program in hydrology. So I got my master's and PhD there and specialized mainly in groundwater. Then after that, it was off to the Reno, Nevada area at the Desert Research Institute for about 13 years, University of New Mexico for 17, and then I came to Oregon State University in 2006. So I think I'm starting my 13th year. So I grew up in Long Island, New York, just east of New York City. So I was a kid of the suburbs, and I had always wanted to go out west, and so after going to undergraduate school, I went out to Arizona, as I said, and I've been there ever since 1970. I did have 1 year in Atlanta at Georgia State University, but went back to the arid west and haven't looked back and enjoyed it. So that's kind of me in a nutshell.
Well, as a geographer, I can't help but notice that you've been making a journey to the west, throughout your life, and now you're just about as far west as you can get in the continental United States.
You're right. I've got about 40 miles left to the Pacific Ocean, and I think I'll stick here.
Good.
So.
Good. Well. So let me ask you, Michael. About the aqueduct, because that's how I first, came across, the kinds of things that you were doing with social media and on the internet with water. And, I started thinking of you as kind of the great communicator for the, academic section of the water world. And so I'm interested in, how you got started in that role and, what you enjoy most about, doing that kind of work.
The great communicator, yes, I like that, but I think some people, probably my high school English teachers, would kind of roll their eyes at that. But in any case, I'm not really sure how I think I kind of stumbled into it or serendipity, something like that. When I was at the University of New Mexico, I started an email list, and I realized in 2019 that doesn't sound like a big deal, but in the early 1990s it was, and would send out all kinds of information. It was pretty much a one-way street. And then as I got older and the social media started to come into play, it actually wasn't until I got to Oregon State here in 2006 that I thought about the idea of starting a blog. I'd had some friends that were experimenting with blogs, and Actually, it's been about 12 years since I've been on the blogosphere at WaterWired, and I'm not, as I said, I can't really pinpoint a day or some time where, I had this great idea just kind of develop, and it seemed like the thing to do. And then it's been about 10 years since I've been on Twitter, and that's enjoyable. I use that to promote my own work as well as the work of others. And so I've really enjoyed it. It sometimes gets a little oppressive in the sense that I feel compelled to post something every day, and sometimes I have a hard time finding the right kind of content. Twitter's not a problem because it's 280 characters up from 140, so I'm always good for 280 characters. But I still enjoy the blog, and I don't foresee stopping it anytime soon. And just when I think I'm running out of stuff to post, a whole bunch of stuff comes my way, and it's mainly from other people. People will say, "Hey, you ought to take a look at this or take a look at that," and so that's kind of where it's at right now. I don't foresee any great changes. I think I do miss on the blog not having as much homegrown content as I used to when I first started out. I go back to 2007, 2008, 2009, and I find out that I had more of my own content on there, just analyzing a paper or some current water issue or something like that. And I do less of that these days and more of putting reports and other people's work out there. But to me, it all has the same end. You're communicating things. You're reaching out to the people at the other end of the pipe there. And so I enjoy it a lot. And I've actually gone to a number of conferences, especially international conferences, and people will come up to me and say, "Oh, you're WaterWired, aren't you?" And we'll get into a discussion. So that's one thing I enjoy about it. You don't just meet people over the internet and never meet them in person, but sometimes you bump into each other literally at conferences, and I find that very enjoyable. So I think that's my greatest enjoyment from doing the blogging and the tweeting as well. I used to give webinars and talks on using social media, but I haven't really branched out to some of the other platforms. I do LinkedIn and Facebook, but I haven't gone into Instagram and Pinterest and some of the other things. I'm pretty content to sit where I am. I've got enough to do, so I don't need any more platforms these days.
No, I can understand that, and I've spent a lot of time on Twitter and LinkedIn myself, and I've kind of thought, well, do I want to make a lot of effort with regard to Instagram? But it seems like, well, then there'll be something else, right?
Right.
And after that,
and I still do have a full-time job at Oregon State and technical director of AWRA. So I'm kind of reaching the limit of my spare time here, as I suspect you are as well.
Yeah, as I sit in here, in between, work and being with the kids and doing all that, trying to sneak in another podcast. I could definitely appreciate that. Well, so one of the things I like about WaterWired is just the incredible reports that you find that I had no idea somebody had done, and all these other things that you're posting on there that I look at. Some of them I look at and I think, wow, I wish I had had that when I was doing research on this subject or that subject.
Yeah, I know, and actually, if I was afraid you were going to ask me. I'm sure you have some scientific method of obtaining these reports, and actually, I don't. As I said a little earlier, sometimes people send me something, or sometimes I'll look at a source that I hadn't thought of looking at, and bingo, some stuff comes up. I discovered something a few years called the FMSO, the Foreign Military Studies Office, which is run by the U.S. Army, and found a good report about environmental issues in Turkmenistan and a few other places. Since then, I haven't found too much else, but it was just another good place to look. And actually, one of my favorite places, as readers of my blog know, is the Congressional Research Service, which is part of the Library of Congress and actually is the Congress's think tank. And they produce some really insightful reports on water and energy and the environment. And again, this is done at the request of a particular congressman or woman or whatever. And they put these out, and I've come to know Betsy Cody, who worked at CRS for 28 years. And she was the one, I think, who kind of turned me on to it. And I'd encourage your listeners to check out the Congressional Research Service. It used to be that they didn't make their reports available publicly, but you could get them on other sites. But now CRS has decided to, they actually have a searchable location, and so you can find reports and get them straight from the horse's mouth. So they're one of my favorite sources. They put out some really good stuff, and also the Government Accountability Office, GAO. So
I love CRS as well, and one of the things that I've really been interested in the last few years is they put out a report at the beginning of each new Congress that looks at the backgrounds. Yeah, have you seen that? Of the Senate and the House. And of course, I was looking for how many scientists are in Congress and tracking that, and how many engineers and other STEM professionals. And so, it's just one of the things that you might not think of, but something that they do.
That's a good an observation. But yes, they put out some amazing material, and they do it quickly too. I remember talking to Betsy about how quickly sometimes they have to respond, and I just kind of shook my head. Boy, I could never do that.
So now, in addition to reports like that, you've got links for jobs and all sorts of other things in WaterWired. How do people find WaterWired? Because anytime you mention jobs and other things like that, they immediately get a pencil and jot it down. And
okay. It's just it's waterwired.org, waterwired.org, and WaterWired is spelled like it sounds. It's WaterWired, one word, .org, and that's it. So no problem.
Good deal. Yeah. So let's shift topics here a little bit. You are part of the program at Oregon State, and I came across you and your colleagues several years ago, and have really been impressed with the folks that you have there and the kinds of things that program is doing. And so I wanted to see if you could just talk a little bit about that program.
Sure. We have a water resources graduate program. It's an inter and multidisciplinary program, and it cuts across 5 or 6 or maybe even 7 different colleges at Oregon State. And it's actually administratively run from the graduate college instead of being housed in a particular college like engineering or ag or something like that. I believe we have about 125 or so faculty members from across the campus who have signed up to be willing to advise students. We offer 5 degrees, 3 master's degrees in water resources science, water resources engineering, and water resources policy and management. And then we offer PhDs in water resources science and water resources engineering. We don't offer a degree in the policy and management because at the time the program was created, which was about 12 or 13 years ago. It was here when I got here in 2006. The faculty felt they didn't have enough strength in policy and management, or at least enough participation from certain faculty to offer a PhD. So, but we still have students who get the equivalent of a policy management PhD. They go through our PhD program in geography, or they go through the PhD program in our School of Public Policy. So there are a number of different ways to attack that. But Oregon State has had a tradition of collaboration across departmental and college lines, quite different from any of the previous schools I've been associated with, University of New Mexico and University of Nevada, Reno, and University of Arizona. And so there's a culture of that here. And that culture, at some point, some people came together and said, well, let's work together and put some degrees together. And so the university bought into it. And so we've been around for about, I guess, close to 15 or 16 years. And as far as I can tell, it's still going strong. The one thing I worry about, and I think this is true of most inter/multidisciplinary programs today, is the funding, because programs that are housed in a particular college generally have the financial support of that college, like, say, engineering or ag or forestry or marine sciences or something. So the college has an investment in the program financially as well as with faculty. And when you're dealing with something like water, which cuts across so many different disciplines, on one hand, each discipline, wants its little piece, and maybe doesn't want anybody else to participate, or sometimes, and I haven't seen this problem at Oregon State, but I ran into it at University of New Mexico, where I was the director of a master's program in water resources, a professional degree, where certain faculty or certain department chairs don't want their faculty to participate in your program because they feel it would detract from their home department in terms of reputation and things like that. I don't really see that much here at Oregon State, although I'm not high enough in the structure of things to be able to observe that. But certainly it seems that everybody gets along. But again, the problem is that the program is administratively housed in the graduate school. Graduate schools generally don't have much of their own money. They don't generate much. And so I worry that at some point, maybe some of the other colleges will say, we don't want to play anymore. So, we're going to take our marbles and go home. I don't really see that at Oregon State, but I know that that's been a problem at some other schools with the inter and multidisciplinary programs. We're still, as much as people pay lip service to inter and multidisciplinary programs, still most schools are, we're still in our little silos, and sometimes the people at the top of the silos, the deans and the department chairs, aren't as collaboratively oriented as the faculty are. But we've managed to surmount that here, and so I'm optimistic about our program at Oregon State.
So I'm, familiar with programs at other universities in the state of Texas that have either, made an effort to do something like that, or get criticized because everybody is in their own silos, and they don't work together. Yeah. And so I'm impressed with the fact that Oregon State's been able to accomplish that, and has got so much going on. I mean, obviously what the things that I'm maybe more familiar with that Aaron Wolf is doing, and others who are interested in water and conflict resolution. To me, that's kind of, as somebody who spent, 25 years or whatever in water management in one aspect or another, that, you know, it seems like most of what when I look back that I was doing over my career was, you know, conflict resolution, or I was, you know, in a conflict and trying to figure out how to resolve it. So that's an area of that program that I'm particularly interested in.
Yeah, and that's a good example, because we have people who deal with conflict resolution and management across a number of different disciplines and departments and colleges here at OSU, and they're all willing to join in the program and participate in it, and take on students and teach or propose new courses and conduct joint research. So it's actually quite unusual in what we have here at Oregon State. I've come to appreciate it perhaps more so than I did when I first got here.
Well, I want to move to something else, and because I love for this to be 2 or 3 hours. Like first time we met, and just about closed down the Starbucks in Corvallis there. But so you are also very active in the American Water Resources Association, and so tell us a little bit about AWRA and where that organization is going.
Well, it's funny you should ask that. I just came back from our January Board of Directors meeting, which seated a new board, 3 new members. I'm not on the board anymore. I'm actually I'm a staff member, but I'm a volunteer. So it was quite exciting. We have a new executive director. We call the executive director the executive vice president, and it's young. And when I say young, you have to consider that I'm 70 years old, but she is a young woman, and her name is Dresden Ferrand. She's from St. Louis and has been active in nonprofit organization management. So she is our new sheriff in town, and so this was her first meeting that she presided over. So she's got a lot of new ideas and things. So AWRA prides itself on being the multi or interdisciplinary professional society, perhaps more so than anything else. So we have obviously water people, but we have people from all over the spectrum, from A to Z, anthropology to zoology, and everything in between. Engineers, hydrologists, planners, public policy people, sociologists, etc. So we've got some lawyers sprinkled in. So we've been doing multidisciplinary work for a number of years. Our journal of the AWRA, JORA, publishes multidisciplinary papers or interdisciplinary papers as well. So we've been doing this kind of work. I think we're 60 years old. 1964 we were created, so actually a little older than 60 years old. And so we've got about 2,000 members. Not big by many professional organization standards, certainly not when you look at ASCE or AGU or GSA or things like that. But the interesting thing is our leadership team right now is entirely female. Our past president is Brenda Bateman. Our president-elect is Betsy Cody. President is Lisa Butler, who works with Stantec, a consulting firm. And then we have Dresden, our executive vice president. So we have 4 women kind of running the show, and it's great. So I enjoy it because it is multidisciplinary, and as I get older, I appreciate what other people do in terms of not being hydrologists such as myself, but talking to lawyers, economists, etc. And we've got a number of irons in the fire. We're having a conference with the Chinese Academy of Sciences in September on water security. We're teaming with them. do a lot of stuff in integrated water resources management. And my job is mainly reviewing technical publications, serving as technical editor for Impact, which is our popular water resources magazine, if you will, that comes out bi-monthly, and trying to promote the interests of AWRA and represent AWRA to a number of other organizations, the American Geosciences Institute, AGI, Geological Society of America, and also proposing ideas for conferences and things like that. And the other thing I love about it is that it's a bottom-up organization. We rely on our members to generate ideas for special issues of our journal, for specialty conferences of certain topics, and technical committees. I'm in charge of the webinars, and so I rely on what the membership wants me to do, not necessarily what I dictate to them. So that's another thing that I like, is the fact that it is it's the most bottom-up organization that I've been affiliated with, and that includes about 6 or so other organizations where, the missives came down from the top, and you did what the top said. So anyway.
Well, speaking of doing what the top said, so you are, of course, a professor and a teacher, and have been doing that for decades now. So
Yes.
I'm trying to be nice, and
no, that's okay. It's scores of years, 2.5 score almost, I guess, close to that.
Well, what is it you enjoy most about that, and what I would like to also ask you is, how do you compare the students you get today to the students that you were getting when you first started teaching?
Okay, good questions. What I enjoy most about teaching is, I would say it's the students. I really enjoy, and in fact, sometimes it's more outside the classroom than inside the classroom, and just chatting with them, finding out what's on their mind, what they think is important, what they see the future as. Is there anything I can do to help them, and those kinds of things. So I just like the contact with them, and getting up in front of the classroom and sallying forth, as we say. In terms of the difference, that's a really good question, and I'm not sure I have a really good answer. If we did this tomorrow, I'd probably have another answer. My feeling is that the students today are not inherently any smarter than the ones I first encountered in the 1970s. But what they do have is, of course, a greater wealth of knowledge, because knowledge is so much easier to find these days. So in the old days, we had to run to the library and read a journal article or something like that. These days, just about everything is online. There are a number of tools. I mean, when I was in grad school, if you wanted to do a numerical model of an aquifer, you had to build your own numerical model. There wasn't anything canned. These days, there are all kinds of things, all kinds of tools that the students have access to. So they're more skilled in doing certain things. I'm not sure that they necessarily have a better understanding of the theory behind a certain thing or a certain model or a certain technique. So, but another thing that I found that's different is, and I think this is not because the students are different, it's just because I have changed in the kind of student with whom I want to work. And what I often say to prospective students, I just had a 90-minute chat with the prospective master's student yesterday, and I said to her, she said, well, what qualities are you looking for? And I said, well, everybody who contacts me is smart, okay? I mean, they've got good grades and good schools and all that stuff. But what I'm looking for is a student who wants to make the world a better place. And she kind of said, well, what do you mean by that? And I said, well, I don't mean that I want you to give up the good things in life and go sit up on a mountaintop and contemplate your navel and all that kind of stuff. But I want someone who has a sensitivity towards the needs of others, who has a strong morally based water ethic and things like that. And if you find that kind of odd, then perhaps we're not a good mix. So sometimes I never hear from the student again, and that's fine. Doesn't mean they're not good. And then other times that really resonates with people. And they say, well, Dean, it's funny you mentioned that. I just spent 3 months backpacking in Ecuador, and I work in a village outside Quito, and I did this and I did that. And so those are the kinds of students I'm looking for. And I used to puzzle about this. And my wife, Mary Frances, who's extremely perceptive, I would say to her, I said, boy, the students I'm finding today, God, they're amazing. And where were they 30 years ago? And I would say that on, and then finally she would say to me, the students haven't changed. It's just that you're looking for a different kind of student because they've always been there. It's just that, when you were in your 30s or early 40s or something, you were looking for something else. And the students there may have had a wonderful ethic or a desire to make the world a better place, but you just didn't draw that out of them. So I think she's right. So I'm not sure there's I think the main difference is that the students today come in with, actually, they know a little bit more about water because water is now found, the study of water, in many undergraduate degrees.
Right.
And whereas when I was in school, we didn't have any water. I mean, this was in the late 60s. Mm-hmm. We didn't have any water courses. And I didn't find out about water until like my junior year that, oh my gosh, geologists can do water. But these days, you find people coming in, they've had at least maybe 1 or 2 courses in basic hydrology. Some have maybe had, a course in fluid mechanics. Certainly if they're engineers, they've had that, but even non-engineers are picking that up. So they come in and they know something. And so I have to teach them less, and we could go on to more advanced topics. So that makes them a little bit different. But in terms of the raw intelligence, I don't see any difference. My first student that I graduated in 1978, Don Mahan, was a heck of a bright guy then, and he still is a heck of a bright guy. So anyway.
I was just thinking back to, when I was in college at Sewanee, it was a very small school, and there was a hydrology course, but it was taught every other year. And so I got in the cycle where I was not in the right part of the cycle to end up taking it, but now they've got, Sewanee's expanded that program, and it's easy to get it there. But one of the things that just, popped in my mind as you were talking about the kind of student you're looking for is a term that I've heard you use. And of course, there are all these great hydro terms like hydro mythology and, some kind of hydrohegemony, hydrostitute. I've heard that one. When I've been down to the legislature, I've heard that a few times. But why don't you tell me about the term I heard from you, hydrophilanthropy?
Philanthropy. Yes, I figured you'd come to that. I've been criticized for that just for the same reason that we've gone through as well. There are too many terms with hydro as a prefix, and they're just meaningless.
It goes with a lot of stuff, though.
It does. And I can't take credit for the term itself. In fact, a good colleague of mine, good friend Dave Kramer at UNLV, he's the one I first heard use the term, and he was using it or used it. I remember he called me up, and I believe it was 2005, and he was thinking about going to some place to work. I think it was in East Africa or West Africa, and he said, well, why don't you tell me about this, and he kind of stumbled, this hydrophilanthropy stuff you do. And I thought, well, my gosh, I thought to myself, that's a neat word because it does describe what it is. It's philanthropy, but it has a distinct orientation towards water. And the way he meant it and the way I usually mean it is kind of satisfying or helping people satisfy their need for clean water and sanitation. And it generally implies donations of some sort, whether it's money or time or work, money or resources or some combination. In other words, not doing it to make an obscene profit or anything like that. It doesn't mean you have to give everything up. So it's just using water as a philanthropic tool. That's all it is. And there needs to be an element of altruism in there as well. And so when the students of mine who've gone into hydrophilanthropy have usually come specifically to work with me on that aspect. And these days I do most of my hydrophilanthropy through a foundation I created in 2002. I work mainly, actually exclusively these days in Central America, in fact in two countries, Honduras and Nicaragua. And I used to take groups of students to Honduras to help people build water systems. These were gravity-fed or gravity flow water systems, kind of simple, to provide drinking water to several hundred people in a small village. So, but it can be much bigger than that. It can be much smaller. And actually, there's some interesting hydrophilanthropic organizations that normally people would not think of as being hydrophilanthropy, but there's some organizations that use the restorative and therapeutic effects of water and also psychologically restorative effects of water to treat people with PTSD, particularly war veterans. There's one organization, I can't recall the name, where they actually use fly fishing. So they're the effects of fishing and the calming effect and the flowing water and that kind of thing has apparently produced some fairly reasonable results. So it's more than just going to a developing country and doing work. It's serving on your local watershed council, volunteering information to an organization that needs help, say here in the U.S. So there are all kinds of ways to manifest or practice hydrophilanthropy. It's not simply running halfway around the world and doing good works. So, and I found a lot of students are very receptive to this these days, and in fact, we're doing quote unquote hydrophilanthropy and weren't really aware of it. But certainly, people in Peace Corps. Got a young woman who's just finished her Peace Corps volunteer work, thinking of coming to school here, and she wants to continue with this kind of work. So yeah, it's actually kind of neat to see these. Students who, when I was their age, I was not thinking about hydrophilanthropy, frankly. And to see them manifest it in certain ways, to me, is really gratifying. So that's a fun aspect of the job.
So in terms of your international work, what have you found that is often a misconception that people in America have about international water management or international water issues?
Boy, that's a loaded question. Let's see. I would think that I've detected some prejudice or some people looking at, say, an organization like the EU and their Water Framework Directive and saying, that would never fly in America because it's too prescriptive and you're trying to tell 400 million people what to do and that kind of thing. But when you actually look at the WFD, it's not really about that. They lay out steps that the countries have to do, but they're not really dictating limits like MCLs or whatever for contaminants or whatever. So I think that we think that other parts of the world either don't practice water management, or they practice it in such a way that it's kind of a top-down thing instead of a bottom-up. That's my perception. I myself, having done traveling, but not as much as say some of our other colleagues that we know, I don't really see that much difference. I do see in some countries, for example, Honduras, where I do a lot of work, they have a lot of laws on the books about water management, particularly water quality. But of course, I shouldn't say of course, but the things aren't enforced real well. So nothing gets done. But on the other hand, I see a good example is there's a lot of water work in Honduras in the rural areas where the community bands together and tries to get some help to build a water system or something. And then they find that if something breaks, they don't know how to fix it. Well, the state doesn't have the resources or the political will to help them out. So what some of the communities have done is they banded together and they formed, I can't remember the Spanish acronym, but they formed a group that actually will provide help. And the group was actually created by, I believe it was an NGO from one of the EU countries. And then once they set it up, they left and they said, okay, guys, you're on your own. And this organization has persisted. And what they do is they essentially have a list of all the people in the various member villages, and last I heard it was like 400, who know how to fix things, like someone who knows how to fix the chlorinator. So if one of the communities has a problem, they contact the central organization and say, hey, our chlorinator broke, or our such and such broke, or our pump broke. Who can fix that? And so they'll look up and see who's nearby, and then that person will go and help them out. And all the organizations, or all the villages, I say, they pay in dues per year. And so this system apparently works pretty well. And I wasn't aware of it until probably about 7 or 8 years ago. And I'd been working in Honduras since 1999 or 2000. So anyway, and there's some water systems in Southeast Asia that have functioned for centuries. And again, these are village-level water systems. So I think it's kind of surprising when I stumble upon, or I shouldn't say, it was kind of surprising when I stumbled upon these water systems that worked and seemed to be managed pretty well. But I'm not that much surprised anymore. So, and I think we Americans are seeing that there are actually some places in the world that, gee, maybe they manage water a little bit better than we do. So, anyway, that's my sense or my feeling. So, that's one reason I like to travel, and especially on water work, to see how other people are dealing with problems on management and governance and things like that. So,
I just recently prepared a book review on a book about groundwater with Robert Mays, a friend of mine here in Texas, and it was in a collection of papers, including international papers on groundwater management. And there was always kind of a tendency for one nation to kind of sum up the other nation's water management in one or two sentences. And there was some author talking about what was going on in the United States and just mentioned what was going on in Texas, and it was like not very well characterized. Yeah, and I thought about that, and I thought, well, water management just within the state that I'm in, it's so complex. I mean, it's hard to find anybody who's really a master of it, and just in the state that they live in or the province they might live in or something like that. But much less being a master of it nationally or internationally.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And I generally these days, something I didn't do in my younger days, I keep my mouth shut but my ears open and my eyes open when I go to another country and see what they're doing. I was actually kind of amazed I was in a meeting in Johannesburg. I'm on a group called the Global Water Partnership that's based in Stockholm on their steering committee, and they promote integrated water resources management. And so sometimes some of the regional groups invite us to have our semi-annual committee meeting in their country. So we were in Johannesburg looking at the South African organization, and what they like to do is put on a little dog and pony show on what they're doing. And I was frankly amazed. Okay, and it's not that I look down on South Africa or something, but these folks are doing some amazing work. And the one thing that was really impressive is that the organization had changed very much changed a lot in the 15 or so years that had been around. And everybody who gave a presentation was a true African, okay, a black African who spoke with exceptional clarity and excellent technical views. And I was just thinking, if I'd been here 15 years ago, it wouldn't have been like this, or maybe even 10 years ago. In other words, the white Africans would be explaining things and stuff like that. And in 2016, it was the polar opposite. It was things had been flip-flopped. So when you go away from that, you see that some things are changing, and in some cases, it's actually water is the medium of change. It's promoting change. So I came away from there, and I was really impressed. And so I saw the same things when I went to Myanmar on another committee meeting. It wasn't as dramatic as it was what you saw in South Africa because of South Africa's apartheid history. But still, it was seeing local people doing the work and figuring things out. And so, yeah. So in that sense, I think water is a great, we know it can be a divisive medium, but I also think it's, as Aaron, our joint colleague Aaron Wolf would say, it does more to bring people together. And as one of my favorite sayings of his is that, people are capable of doing horrible things to each other, but what they seem reluctant to do is to turn each other's water off. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. And that's an extreme saying. I didn't see anything like that in South Africa or Myanmar, or when I worked in the South Caucasus, Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan. I saw water bringing people together. So anyway,
it's it's interesting in Texas. I've seen from the beginning of my career in the 80s to today, a real series of changes in terms of diversification, gender diversification, and racial. Whereas when I was originally going to meetings and functions with other folks people who are leaders of water organizations, you didn't see that, but now it's so different, and so it's really been a great improvement in the water community here in the state. Let me ask you about this. This is one thing that I've wondered about, and I may be wrong about this, but one difference that has I've seen glimpses of is the difference between the amount of data that we have in the United States and the amount of data that people have in other places. I mean, when I was doing my dissertation, there were daily readings of well levels and spring discharge rates going back to the 30s and in the 20s in some places. And it's just an immense amount of data to work with. And the perception I've gotten is that few countries really have that. and they're trying to manage their water without having the specific information about what might have happened in the past. They may have anecdotal information, but
yeah, a good example of that, when I started working in the South Caucasus in the early 2000s or something like that. Of course, this was about 10 years after the breakup of the Soviet Union, and I was working in the Kora Rocks Basin, which affects Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan, and had become a point of contention over water quality, and the downstream riparian Azerbaijan complaining and all this thing. And I asked them about data, and they kind of looked at me and rolled their eyes, and they actually had a whole bunch of data on that system, but they didn't know, well, I won't say they didn't know where it went. It was all back in Moscow because these data were collected during the Soviet Empire era, and so everything went back to Moscow because the orders came from Moscow. In other words, you guys do this, or you store more water in the dam and all this kind of thing. And so they were actually flying blind in terms of information. Although I did find one chemist in the Georgian capital, Tbilisi. He was at the National University, and on the air ducts that snaked around his lab, hung from the ceilings, there were all these file cards. And I asked him, I said, what are those things up there? And he says, oh, those are water quality data that have been collected here. And he had 500,000 index cards with data on them.
Oh,
and I
gosh.
said, well, where is this stored electronically? He said, no, this is it right here. And I said, whoa, and he showed me some of the cards, and of course the writing had faded, but on many of them, but he just, no one could help him archive these in some form. He said he had tried to go to the government, and they didn't have any money, and so they were just sitting up there, and that was the only place he had to store them. So they had, that was information, but it wasn't being used, and I think probably by now, if it's still in his lab, it's probably got to the point where you can't read anything on the cards.
So that brings back some bad memories. So I was doing some research on the Texas coast, and just happened to discover that someone or an outfit from Pennsylvania had been collecting data on one of the bays since the mid-1940s, and so before the drought record. And so I was like, we got to get that. We got to see, what happened to the salinity in the bay during the drought record, before the drought record, and after, and all that. And it turned out that that just a few years prior to that data, which had been in some file cabinets in a warehouse in Maryland, they they pitched it all out. I mean, it sat there for decades. Yeah, and so it's like, it's really it's like gold. I mean, you can't really go back and reproduce that. I mean, having done tree ring studies and things like this, you don't have that kind of fine, detailed information, available in other ways, and so. That's kind of scary.
Boy, that is scary, and I'm sure there are other instances we could probably come up with, or others, about data that's since flown the coop or vaporized, or essentially, the third law of thermodynamics took over and entropy kept increasing. So I know, but that's what can you do? You can't get it back.
Right. You can't. So,
I know, that's profound. That's the best we can come up with, Todd. You can't get it back.
And that's probably a good note to end on too. You can't get it back for sure.
No. Okay.
Well, thank you, Michael, for joining me. This has been fun.
It has, yes. I've enjoyed it immensely. And off topic, I want you to do a webinar for us at AWRA. So I'll get back to you. We can talk about that at some point. But
oh, good. Well, it's not going to be on lost data. That's too depressing. But I'll look forward to that. Thank you. And
you're welcome.
So let me go ahead and just say that this is Todd Votler, and I've been speaking to Michael Campana today, who is a professor at Oregon State University, and this is the Talk Plus Water podcast, our fourth podcast, and we invite you to join us again for the next podcast, which I was going to say who it will be, but I never quite know. Oddly enough, I mean, you make appointments for people to do it, and something changes on their schedule or my schedule, and then they end up doing it months later or something. But it'll be somebody. I can guarantee you that.
Okay.
Right.
I'm sure.
It won't be just me talking for an hour, which would really not be good. But
actually, that would probably be. I'd like to hear that. You should interview yourself. Yes.
There you go. There you go. I get one of my children to interview me. That might be disastrous. But thanks again, Michael, and I look forward to seeing you again in the future.
Okay, and thank you for inviting me. I really enjoyed it, Todd.
Great. And that's it. Okay, thank you.